So I have a thing, and I hate reading things, but I can't memorize all this. So I'm going to read this. Shawn's career in conflict resolution and peace building has spanned 25 years of working with people and organizations of all walks of life to help them find mutually satisfying solutions to intractable problems. In 2009, he co-designed and led the first ever Palestinian-Israeli Emerging Leaders Expedition, which led to 6 years of working behind the scenes with leaders in the Middle East. In Washington, D.C., he worked under the mentorship of Congressman John Lewis, who we all know, one of the longest serving congressmen alive now, over a 4-year period of time in which he co-designed and led the Congressional Conversations on Race project, which involved supporting members of Congress in hosting breakthrough dialogues in their districts. Shawn has also worked extensively in the private sector. In 2016, he resigned as COO from the corporate training company Venture Associates in order to start his own current private consulting company. What state have you not been in, Shawn?
I'll make you guess.
All right, well, I'm going to say Alaska or Hawaii.
He's been to Alaska, come on.
Okay. He's been in 49 states. He loves to travel. I envy this man. He's been living his life well. 50 countries. And he chose to live out of all those countries and all those states. He lives in Richmond, California. Has since 2016, and he has 2 daughters. It says here he's raising them. That's good. Thank you. He enjoys, in his free time, rock climbing, sailing, and hang gliding. Just a couple of notes on our topic today. I find if you just spend 20 minutes on Nextdoor when someone's complaining about homeless people, you find out how intractable it is just to even talk about it. You can't talk about homelessness because the word homeless is offensive to some people, so you have to change your language. I don't care. I'm not here to have an opinion about that. But then pretty soon, you can't do anything about it, or you can do something about it. But you can't give them a bag of food because that encourages them to be homeless and stay where they're at. You can't worry about housing, or you have to worry about housing, or it could be drugs. It's only housing. About 10 or 15 minutes of this. And Ronald Reagan. It's his fault. Or it goes on. And it becomes quite sickening to even think about it. So it's no surprise that when we drive by that guy who's been there for 10, maybe 12 years at the corner of Central and the Freeway 80. He's still there. And you just have to look away because it's too uncomfortable to be living in the middle of a humanitarian crisis that doesn't seem to have an end, that doesn't seem to have a solution, and for which our leadership, for one reason or another, seems to be hamstrung. They're having the same hard time talking about it that we have. So I'm really happy to have Shawn. He's done some traveling. He's seen a few nonprofit partnerships with government, and I think that's the nature of your talk. I'm going to stop and let you go.
I did not ask for this, by the way. I want to, maybe you'll walk out of the room when I say this. I'm not an expert on homelessness, and I'm not. But if there's anything I'll be proud of and accept, it's that I have been spending 25 years working on collaborative problem solving. And it's from that perspective that I want to talk about this. So, I won't say much more by way of introduction other than my real passion is, I'll just be blunt, working toward a world that works for everyone. And, I'm a member of Richmond Rotary. If there's any organization whose mission statement most closely resembles my own, it would be Rotary. And that's been, they say that the older you get, the less idealistic you become, but for me it's the opposite. But I want to say that the more idealistic I become, the more realistic I become also. Those are not mutually exclusive concepts. And so what that means is when you want to take something on, when you want to solve a problem, don't just accept what can be done. Think about what should be done and aim real high. When I suggested, hey, what if we took, some Israelis and Palestinians on a wilderness expedition? I'm not talking about kids. I mean people who are actually significant in society there. Like the chief of staff for a member of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, along with the senior advisor to the Palestinian president, business leaders, educators, all sorts of folks like this. Understandably, people laughed at that and said, yeah, good luck with that. And it's a long story, it's a whole nother presentation, but a couple of years after I kind of posed that, all of a sudden I'm leaving my job in California, moving to Washington, D.C. to take this on, and the rest is history. Now, you might be asking, okay, did that solve peace in the Middle East? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But what it did do is provided a proof of concept that it is possible for people who literally want to kill each other to transform their perspective and imagine a different way forward. Now, in the Middle East, they haven't co-created that way forward yet, but for those who say it's not possible for someone like this and someone like that to see things eye to eye, I can now say absolutely that's wrong. It is possible. The question with all these challenges is how do we take it to scale? If something we know could work, how do you take it from that petri dish experiment to scale? And that's what I want you to be thinking about today when I share some thoughts and a couple stories. So, homelessness. This is not something that I ever imagined really getting involved in. I mean, I care about it probably as much as all of you do, as much as pretty much anybody does. But it also feels kind of, just impossible. And so, like Andy was saying, you encounter someone unhoused on a corner and maybe you just want to look the other way. Does it mean you don't care? No. It means you're ashamed. You don't know what to do. And you don't want to look them in the eye. So I think a lot of us are in that boat. In fact, if you're a human being and you see somebody else suffering, it inherently does not feel good. And yet the question is, what can we do? So I'm not here to offer panacea, but I am going to share from a couple things that I encountered as I took this on. So first of all, for me, it started, really, why I'm standing here today, it started on January 4th of last year. Does anyone know why that's a significant date to me? Some of you do. So, I'm not here for political reasons, but that's the day that I, perhaps foolishly, I don't know, but certainly idealistically, declared that I was going to run for mayor of Richmond. And, no, that was last year and I didn't win. but the reason I wanted to do it has everything to do with what I've just been saying. I was not your traditional politician. I didn't start with a platform on different positions. I said, hey, my purpose is I want to get everyone to the table. Because I know that when you get people who otherwise disagree with each other working toward a common goal, that's powerful. In fact, it's more powerful than any alignment of one side against another. So that's what fired me up. I knew as an outsider that I would have to work way harder than anybody else. I did not have any name recognition. I had no previous experience in politics. What the heck was I doing here? Well, I decided I was going to start running, literally. And I hit the ground running, on foot, in shoes like this, through the streets of Richmond. And if you know the map of Richmond, it's kind of complicated, but I ran 527 miles, covering every street of Richmond at least twice. And along the way, I met 5,000 people face to face. And every time I encountered someone, I asked them to tell me what was important to them. I never started the conversation by saying what I thought. Everything was about hearing from others. Well, guess what? The very first day, after I filed my paperwork at City Hall, I literally went out running within an hour. And guess who the very first people were that I encountered? These fine gentlemen who were living behind Target, affectionately known as Targetville. They're all smiling there, which is interesting. When I first ran up, I was running on the Greenway there. And I was just running by, and I see this encampment. And, they kind of looked, and I made eye contact. And you know when you make eye contact with someone, and just that subtle moment, you can tell if it's an invitation or not. It definitely was. And I stopped. And we started talking. Hour and a half later, I was getting kind of cold. It was late in the day, and I needed to get home, to my kids. But we had a fascinating conversation. And in the first probably 45 minutes, I didn't mention anything about who I was or what I was doing. I was just a guy on a run having a conversation with these people. I learned that one of them is a former paralegal. He was gainfully employed, and then he had a mental health crisis with no support, no safety net, nothing. All of a sudden, he's living on the street. Another one told me he has a degree in civil engineering from Berkeley. His shack was very well built. Seriously. I'm hearing all these stories, and we're talking about things, and at some point I was a little nervous and said, well, don't take this the wrong way. Full disclosure, I'm actually running for mayor. And they all got excited. And we took this picture. They actually took pictures with their phones. I said, well, if you're going to take a picture, I'm going to take a picture. And I did not use this for my campaign in any way, but this was an inspiring moment for me because it was just strangers connecting, but through this conversation, I immediately I could not stop thinking about this, right? As I went through Richmond, I encountered hundreds of people living outside in tents and various encampments. I spent countless hours talking to people, hearing their stories, and I'll share a little bit about that. But one takeaway, one absolute conclusion I made from my direct experience, speaking for myself, there is no simple explanation for homelessness. Anytime you read something or you hear somebody say, well, the problem is, we just need more mental health support, or, we just need more affordable housing, or, if we just need this, we just need that. Well, probably there's a little bit of truth in all of it, but there is no one simple explanation. If I were to be forced to say what simple explanation would there be, it's not simple, but it's a lack of community. It's a lack of a safety net. I mean, how many people in here, if you were all of a sudden to find out that you couldn't go home today, would be able to go somewhere else, would know people who could support you? When you talk to these folks and you hear their stories, it's tragic. I talked to several people in Richmond who have lived here all their lives, and their elderly parent passed away, and the house went into probate, whatever, and some distant relative in Mississippi inherited the house, and they had no family, they had no connection, and all of a sudden, just like that, this person is literally living on the street. I'm sure there's more to it, but I heard versions of that story several times. What do you say to that, right? Well, in all these stories, when I ask people things like, well, do you know about the shelters? There's GRIP, there's the rescue mission, there's others. I would hear various things like, I don't feel safe, and this is not a knock on them. I think they do really good work. But what I was told by people was they don't feel safe, or they have a dog, they can't take their dog, or, because they've got a bit of a drug problem, they're not allowed to be there, or I heard lots of different things, but there was always a reason. And it's not that they did not want help. Nobody said they did not want support. Maybe one person, a former Army Ranger who was living in the kind of in the forest in my area, where I won't disclose, was happy as a clam. He said, this is just the way I want to live. And, it made me think, well, maybe there's something to that too. Is it my place to tell someone that if they're happy living outside that they shouldn't? Don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for one policy or another. I'm just saying it's complex, there's a lot to it, and so it begs the question, what can we do? I'm not going to get into a lot of stats. Andy asked me not to. And I don't, but I want to share this real quick. So this is based on information from HUD, Department of Urban Development, Housing and Urban Development, federal, from 2007 to 2022 in California. Homelessness has gone up 23%. Family homelessness has gone down 9%. That's nice. This is a little hard to see, but individuals up 32%. But there's one number that really jumps out here, and as you learn more about the issue, this should say a lot. Chronic homelessness, 43% increase. Now, chronic, the definition offered by HUD for chronic homelessness requires two things. That you've been homeless for at least 9 to 12 months, and there's different ways to count that. But so you've been homeless for a long time, and you have some sort of disability. Now think about that. Just simply putting somebody in a house, is that going to solve the problem? It might for some, but certainly not for all. Anyway, if you go and look in just California, specifically, Richmond Contra Costa, technically it's gone down. And in fact, this number, for those who have been paying attention to the news, it actually has been adjusted. This is old. This is a few weeks old. There's a new release from Contra Costa Health Department that says, oh, actually we made a mistake in the point of time count. It's actually not so bad. Homelessness has only gone up 4% since last year. Their total number is 2372 instead of 3,000. So, all right, so 700. They're saying it's actually 700 less. Well, we can play with numbers all day long, but who here thinks that having over 2,000 people homeless in Contra Costa County is okay? So whether it's 2,000 or 3,000, we still have a problem, and there's nothing here that says we're doing any better at it. But compared to the rest of the state, I guess we're better off. But look, all these numbers have gone down. Total down 24%. Everything down one number. Chronic has gone up. This tells a story, right? Keep that in mind. This was the information on their website before they released the new data, basically saying, the data's faulty. I don't think it's been updated by the feds yet, so I'm still just reporting what the federal government is reporting. But here's another interesting thing, and this is the end of stats, I promise. California, we're looking at 44 people per 10,000 are unhoused. Not good, right? Well, Richmond, Contra Costa, we're only 26. But Oakland, Alameda, twice that much. San Francisco, 4 times that much. So if you live around here and you think we've got a problem just by what you've seen, imagine San Francisco being 4 times as severe. So that is to plant a seed, if you haven't thought about this already, that even if we're doing a fantastic job right here, what's that to say for the big picture? This is much bigger than just one place. But here's a fun fact, as I was looking at some other new data released recently. There's an organization called Cal Matters. They do like nonprofit news and whatnot. They did a whole feature on specifically Texas, which was nice to read and find out that it actually supported all the conclusions that I already came up with. But when you look at cost of housing, because people say, well, we just need more affordable housing. Well, sure, that's obviously part of it. Well, this really tells you a picture. And Texas, like in Houston, Austin, San Antonio, we're looking at median $1,200 a month or so, $1,000 to $1,200 a month for rent. In San Francisco, try $3,000. Los Angeles, $2,200. So there is a fundamental issue with just how expensive things are, but I don't need to tell you that. So this all begs the question, what can we do? What ought to be done? And again, I'm not coming with complete answers, but I do want to share some things through the lens of collaborative problem solving that I think we ought to be looking at. Who's heard of this term appreciative inquiry? It's actually a body of research. I learned about this in graduate school 24 years ago. Basically, it's an approach to problem solving that says, instead of putting all your energy into pointing out what's broken to try to fix it, find the nuggets, the little kernels, the tiny little glimmers of hope of what could or does work. And then invest your energy in that and spread it. I do a lot of consulting with organizations, and a lot of times when I come on, they're having problems. And you talk to someone, it's like, it's the worst place in the world to be. But you know what? There's no organization that exists that doesn't have a memory of something good happening. And so I say, well, tell me about a time when it worked. And we analyze what was working about that. And sure enough, people were communicating differently with each other. There was a better system for problem solving. So you don't have to go far as long as you're looking for the right thing. So what do we look for here? Well, as I'm thinking about this and pondering this and talking to random people all over the city of Richmond, even in places where there's no apparent homelessness in their face, in their neighborhood, it's still one of the main concerns or main issues for people. They want to help. They just don't know what to do. So I'm constantly thinking about it. And I come across this documentary called Finding Hope. And you can look this up, beyondhomeless.org, if you make a note of that. And by the way, anything I say today, I don't have handouts. But if you send me an email, get my info, be happy to forward on and connect you with everything I know about. Whatever questions you have that I have the answer to, I'll share it. But beyondhomeless.org, I encourage you to go check that out. Watch this free documentary. It's like 40 minutes long. You can sign up for their mailing list and whatnot. But this feature is specifically looking at the problem of San Francisco. And then about a third of the way into it, it switches to Texas. Why Texas? Well, get to that in a second. In San Antonio, they have a place called Haven for Hope. Some of you have heard about it now. And this documentary features it as this place that has reduced homelessness 80%. You know, it's the answer to all these things people are concerned about. If you've got a dog, great, they've got a kennel. If you've got a drug problem, great, you're welcome with open arms, and they have all the support on site to help you with that. Oh, and by the way, if you don't want help, that's fine. You can stay in what they call the courtyard area, which is still going to keep you safe. And when you're ready to receive help and move into their transformational support, which is more traditional living and other, when you're ready for that, they're there for you. But you can stay sleeping outside the courtyard for as long as you want. They're not going to bother you, but you're safe. And I can't underscore that enough, this notion of safety. Imagine trying to sleep with one eye open, just watching your back all the time, and what that does to someone who's already been traumatized. So it's a safe place. You can bring animals. You can show up high and drunk. All these, and I'm going to tell you more about it later. But anyway, I find myself telling people about this. Like, hey, there's this place in San Antonio called Haven for Hope, and they do all these things, and maybe we ought to think about something like that here. And but I found myself talking it up so much that I had a bit of a crisis of conscience. I was like, you ever sold something that you didn't actually know about? I felt like before I said anything more, I needed to see it for myself. So I got on the phone. They were super gracious. I spoke with one of the VPs. They're like, I told them my story, and they said they'd love to give me a tour. So I got a red eye to Austin, and I'll tell you why I went to Austin. And this was in September, which is not a good time to leave an election. Anybody need a shower? So I go to, and I tell a few friends that I'm doing this, but somebody else tells me, hey, there's this program in Austin called Community First Village. And they pulled some strings and got me a tour there as well. So off to Texas I go to check these places out and see for myself if they're actually what they say they are. And so first I started in Austin. And this place, Community First Village, it's not Haven for Hope. What this is a large, it's about 50 acres, about 350 at the time residents who they've all been chronically homeless. Remember that? The stats I pointed out? They've all been chronically homeless, and these are people who just, the system has never worked for, but they found their way here. And it is a community. I just love this term community first, and it's a play on housing first, which has been California's policy, which basically suggests if you just put people in houses, then everything else will follow and we'll take care of them. And it's more than that, but generally speaking, they say the first thing you got to do is get someone in a house, then give them all the support you need. What they're saying here is, the first thing people need is community. Well, guess what? Go to any encampment, and with the exception of the Army Rangers living in the woods, most encampments are what? They're a community. They might be a very dysfunctional one. There might be a lot of things happening there that we could just say are not good, but they're still a community. We're human beings. And at the end of the day, we can't just treat people as a number, as a house. This is about community. We need each other. And here they've built this intentional community. Well, guess what? This is not done by government at all. This is led by a guy named Alan Graham. Mobile Loaves and Fishes have been working at feeding the homeless for years in the Austin area. Wealthy real estate investor. decided he wanted to dedicate the rest of his life toward housing people. Right? You're not going to get that from government. He was absolutely passionate about doing this, and he worked one step at a time. They learned a lot along the way. They started with just a couple of tiny homes. They had RVs. They had other things. They learned. They kept going, and now they've got this place. And I talked to this guy. His name's Royce, and he had been there about 9 months. And when he could tell that I was interested in listening to a story, he wouldn't stop. I had to finally cut him off an hour later and say, I'm sorry, I've got to drive to San Antonio. He was so just absolutely excited to just talk and tell me everything. And I'll just tell you a little bit. He had been living under bridges around Austin for 20 years. Remember, the definition of chronic is only 1 year, but for 20 years, on and off, he had been out there. He had been into little temporary shelters here and there, but it never worked for him. He had some mental health challenges that he told me about. He had some addiction challenges that he told me about. It's not that people didn't try to reach out and help, but there was never anything that really worked. And then he found himself here, and he's like the happiest he's been in his life. And if you hear his life story, which he told me a little bit about, it's not a happy one. Not at all. You want to know another commonality amongst certainly most of the unhoused folks that I've met? It's not just a crisis of community, but a family and friends, and they're alone. And so here he is at Community First, and he's telling me about his experience. I didn't get hardly a chance to ask the question. He just kept talking. But he kept coming back to this image. He talked about his neighbor watering the plants. Okay, why do you keep telling me about your neighbor? Like his neighbor here in this village, watering the plants. And he's like, and he's watering his plants, and like, wow. And then it hit me. This was the first time in his life he had a neighbor. Certainly in his adult life. And the mundane task of watering plants means what? You live here. This is home. Really super powerful. And anyway, I hope he's still there. I don't know. If I go back, I'm going to look for him. But it seemed like he was on the right track. A couple pictures here. So these are very small homes. They're mostly single occupancy. They're all built, Graham, when he did this, he said, we do this with dignity. We're not like recycling things. We're not giving people used things. Everything's brand new. They do pay rent. It's like $400 a month. But anybody who has a disability and collecting disability or Social Security, the reality of coming up with a few $100s a month is actually not a problem if you have all your needs. So they do pay rent. It does not come close to covering the costs of the place, but it is a part of a sense of ownership that they are paying for themselves. They have this little market that I went into, and there's a bunch of things in there for sale. I'm just going to pass some of these around. These are some postcards that some artists made. They have all sorts of other things in there. They've got a lot of really talented artists that sell their stuff in there. I thought that was pretty cool. This is, like I said, it was privately directed and built, but then they created a lot of partnerships with local government. Transit agencies, they got a bus stop put in. This is kind of on the outskirts of Austin. It's not right downtown. It's a little outside of the city. So they got a bus stop put in. They have, right next to the little store here, is a clinic where they have a county health department that come and they so you can get health checkups and they have mental health support and some other things. Not a whole lot of services, but a lot of the basics so people don't have to leave to get that. This is a bit sobering. This is a memorial. When you go to Community First, they make a commitment to you that you can live there for the rest of your life, and they'll take care of everything. And one sad fact I learned is that most people who have been chronically homeless, their life expectancy is like, into their 50s or 60s. Obviously, when you get healthier, hopefully that goes longer. But a lot of people, this is their forever home. This is not a temporary solution. This is home once and for all. And in case you're wondering about the NIMBY, not my backyard mentality, I thought I'm going to go for myself and just check who lives around here. I drove through a little, I didn't get a chance, I didn't see anybody outside. I didn't want to knock on doors, but I did just drive around. This is like right on the other side of their property. I do understand when I did some research on this that there was some concern from the local community, but through a problem-solving process, they came to an agreement that as long as there were no sex offenders living community first, then the community was okay with it. So that was kind of one of the conditions. Okay, moving on to San Antonio. So this is the real target for my trip. Again, here's that stat. From 2009 to 2019, homelessness in San Francisco went up 80%, and it's been more since then. In San Antonio, 11% decline since then. Pretty stark difference. But here's why I'm talking about this, and here's what my interest is. On the left, you have Phil Harberger, who was the mayor of San Antonio. And he gave a State of the State address in 2005, specifically to the business community. And he said, we've got a problem. We all know we have a problem. I need your help. Think about that. An elected leader speaking to the public saying, I need your help. Not saying, I've got all the answers, but I need your help. We've got a problem. We've got to do it together. Well, that got the attention of this guy, Bill Greenhay, who at the time was the CEO of Valero Energy. Big oil? Anyone? Let's just say politically, these two were not aligned at all. In fact, they were kind of enemies. Greenhay was definitely not a supporter of the mayor politically, but he heard his talk, and he set up a meeting, and he came and sat down, and he said, are you really serious about this? And the mayor said, absolutely. And he kind of shared, Bill shared some concerns about all the problems, why things that are being done aren't working. And so Phil said, you're in charge. And he essentially deputized Bill Greenhay to lead the way, and that's what he did. And he did it with a business mindset mentality. He built partnerships. And I say he, it was him at the beginning. Ultimately, this was truly a team effort. Before doing anything, they reached out to all the people involved in homelessness. All those organizations, those nonprofits, the local government groups, various organizations that are providing support in one way or another, whether it be housing, mental health, medical, job training, whatever, and got them on board with building a vision together. Now, I spent a lot of time in nonprofits, and mostly in Washington, D.C. I saw how people working toward things that really matter, like racial reconciliation. They're doing it for the right reasons, but unfortunately, tragically, all these organizations are essentially competing for funding to essentially try to do the same thing. But, my organization does it better than yours. And so what do? We get this kind of mediocre, a lot of parallel efforts that are not coordinated, they're not in collaboration. But what happened here was, let's get everyone on the same page and co-create a vision. This was early 2006. 4 years later, Haven for Hope opened in 2010. Imagine that, 4 years. It cost $125 million to build, which might sound like a lot, but if you look at California's budget, how much we've been spending, this is pennies. 125 million is nothing. But what's really interesting, 60% of it was private money. So yeah, inherently there's already money coming from feds and local state government, and they could find ways to use that. But 60% came from private champions. With Greenhay leading the way, he talked about how people are always reaching out to him to ask for money. So now this is his turn to go and fundraise. And yeah, he put a lot of skin in the game too. But ultimately, it was a collaborative fundraising effort, 60% private funding. So check this out. This is in the heart of San Antonio. It's accessible, so it's within the city. It's not like on the outskirts. It's 22 acres, 17 buildings, 300 staff, opened in 4 years. This was city property, most of it. There was some abandoned industrial stuff. So some buildings were reused. A lot of it was built from scratch. But they refer to this as a campus. It's not just a shelter. It does have that. It's not just wraparound services. It does have that. It's everything together in one place. And basically, you don't even have to be homeless to go there for help. If you are finding yourself in a situation where you've got no one to turn to, go to Haven for Hope. And for some people, it just, you know what, they just needed a voucher for something, or they just needed this, or they just needed that. For others, they need a place to stay. And they don't say, well, you can stay for 3 months and then you're gone. They say, stay as long as you need. The VP was telling me how, some people are there a couple days. There's been some people there for several years. That might sound horrible to you, but if you think about it, we're talking about handling the range of complexity. Show up with your dog. Show up high and drunk. In fact, because there's so many services, 150 partner organizations working with Haven for Hope, most of which are on site. All those resources that already exist in society are just co-located. So that if you're going to an appointment for whatever, even if you're not staying there, you can go there. But if you are staying there, imagine if you were in an encampment around town and someone very helpful set up an appointment for you at Martinez for a counseling session on Thursday afternoon at 3. Okay, how are you going to get there? Here it's like down the hall on your left, right? So entrance, anybody can just walk up.
3 minutes maybe?
Okay, to wrap this up big time. The security, everybody goes through security. One thing that people really appreciate here is that they're screening everybody going in. There's no drug dealing going on the inside. And I'm not going to stereotype certainly that's not true at all with all unhoused people, but encampments do become a place for drug dealers to go. And that doesn't happen here, so people feel safe on the inside. So much so that they'll actually tell the security if they suspect something's going on. The security, by the way, they are trauma informed. They're not just your rent-a-cop from, whatever. They are highly skilled, trauma informed, compassionate people. I observed some of security officers interacting with people, and I was really, really impressed. And it sounds like the residents are too. So you think about traditional homeless shelter like bunks, and yep, they've got that. That's true. They've got a courtyard. Some people just want to sleep outside. They don't feel safe, or it's just too crowded inside or whatever. So take your pick, fine. But then when you're ready to move on, they have this transitional housing, which is, nice apartments. They have, the county food bank is actually co-located here, so they're helping other people too, but obviously that's where the food comes from here. Check this out. Can you imagine what this is? Those are medications. That's the I don't know what they call it the drug rooms, but there's a nurse in here, 24/7. When you need your medications for whatever, it's going to be properly dispensed. But just if that's not a picture of what's going on, I don't know what is. Vision, mental health, medical. This is just one glance inside the partner center with all the organizations. The first of its kind, only YMCA daycare program in the country co-located within a shelter environment. So when people are working on job training and placement, they've got a place for their kids to be taken care of as they go. This was really interesting. They talked about how they got an EMT on site, and their 911 calls from the shelter went down dramatically. And they were able to show that they were saving, to the city, millions of dollars just in taxpayers' dollars in fire and police response to things, because it was all being handled right on site. Like I mentioned, 80% reduction in homelessness. This stat's a little old now. Now it's up to 7,000 people they've helped get permanent housing. This is one of the stats that really got me. 92% who get put into permanent housing as a result of leaving Haven for Hope are still permanently housed a year later. You'll be hard-pressed to find 10% anywhere around the Bay Area, with a few exceptions of a couple tiny programs. 92%. And this, $40 per person per day. In San Francisco, they were spending $6,000 for a tent. These core values, I observed it. I absolutely believe this is not just about numbers. This is not just about budgets and great strategies. It's ultimately about compassion, servant leadership, really truly been driven by hope, and pursuit of excellence. Here I am selling for that, but it's true. I witnessed it. So a couple of points that I just want to make. Yes, affordable housing. Obviously, UCS Benioff study just came out saying, well, if everyone just had $300 to $500 more a month, they wouldn't be homeless. I'm not sure it's that simple, but point taken. We clearly need more affordable housing. By the way, Texas, smaller population than us, they're building way more housing than we are, which has a lot. It's supply and demand, folks. That's why it doesn't cost as much to live there. One of the reasons. Yeah, we need that. That's not the end-all be-all. Really, I think what we need more than anything is collaboration. Having people at the table who disagree with each other. That's your magic formula. Don't just get together with people who already agree, oh, housing first. No, not housing first. Get them all together, and don't give up until we're all on the same page. We need private champions. This can't be done by government alone. But government's a big part of it, a big part of the convening, the partnering, etc. This needs to be about being transformational, not management. It's not just about keeping people alive. That's good to do. But we need to transform the context so that nobody feels so lost and alone that they feel like have no choice but to turn to the street. Think about that. But I want to say this. If we really want to take it seriously, and some people don't like when I go here, but you have to consider if all those people right now, with all the problems that have led them to be homeless, if they were in a home somewhere but still had all those problems, have we solved the problem? Or are they just out of our sight? That's something to consider. So moonshot thinking means that's the kind of thinking we need to consider. This is more than just homelessness. This is more than any specific thing. But it's all of it. And so the question is, what's next around here? I'll just wrap up by saying, I'm not an expert on this. I was invited to share my experience in Texas at my Rotary Club, and that led to another presentation. If it could be a catalyst. I got a text this morning from someone associated with a very big company, and I'm not counting this for anything, but it was an interesting exchange where they said, we'd love to be at the table and help, take a lead. So, well, that's great, but once a compelling vision is developed, there's going to be a lot of people wanting to, and that's excellent. I said, unless you know of like a billionaire who's ready to jump in like Bill Greedy and just really charge forward. And this person said, well, I might know someone, let's talk. So I'm not optimistic that that's really going to go anywhere, but that was just kind of a catalyst. I've been invited to speak, with a few other people. If I play a role in this, what I want to do is help convene and inspire people. I will never be the expert on everything about this, but I will be the person who says, wait a minute, I don't think we're thinking high or big enough. But we can. So that's what I want to leave you with. And I guess I don't know if I used up all my time for Q&A, but I'm happy to stick around later and do whatever.
Let's talk about that 1 second. We do have to close the meeting, but do you have a few minutes? Because I'd like to hand the mic back to you. If people don't need to leave, feel free to stay and ask a few questions on Mike, because you have a lot to say and we didn't give you enough time.
Anybody works in this space, certainly public servants who don't make much money, and for that matter, I'm not going to trash any politicians. I think anyone who steps up to try to work in that space does mean well. I think it's just a lack of imagination and belief in what's possible. And so we settle, right? It's really tangible to think, oh, here's a program that, doles out tents to everybody, and we've got a great way to feed them. And like all of a sudden you're all consumed in that, and there's no thinking big beyond that. And maybe to their credit, they're stuck in the immediate responsiveness of dealing with managing the crisis, and they don't have the bandwidth to step back and think about what would be transformational. I really don't, and having worked in the nonprofit sector, I was with Search for Common Ground for 10 years. There's not a single person in that organization. We're working in 40 countries around the world. I don't think there's a single person who wouldn't want to be driven out of work by succeeding. And the reality is, if you do that, you're probably going to be in demand somewhere else, right? So if a nonprofit does a really amazing job, they're going to all of a sudden be in demand. And until we eradicate homelessness across the world, I don't think we're there for a long, long time. So I disagree. I don't think I think that's just an understandable but cynical approach on just looking at numbers. But the hearts of the matter, people do care, they just don't know what to do. So if anyone wants to walk out, great, won't take it personally, but I know I see a lot of hands, so let's keep talking. Yes?
Can you tell me what the occupancy for the shelter, the Haven for Hope?
16 or 1,700 people. Yeah, and they've been pretty much at full occupancy. Yeah. So, I mean, they handle, I think, something like 7,000 people a year, which means not everybody actually needs all that support. And one thing they told me is only 15, this is specific to Haven for Hope, but maybe it's translatable to other places. The VP told me only 15% of people who came to them really needed or would benefit from a, quote, housing first answer. It wasn't just simply needing shelter. They needed other things, and they needed it in conjunction with that, not after. Yes?
Does this organization have any community, one-on-one support for these individuals?
Do they have one-on-one support for the individuals? So they have a range of caseworkers, and I think depending on what kind of support someone needs, most of that one-on-one support is coming from the various partner organizations. So if someone is, their thing is they're out of work and they don't have any money and no place to live, and they're kind of okay otherwise, and they're working with someone, a case manager, on job training and placement.
What
So
about sponsorship?
sponsorship like mentors or
Yes, continuous sponsorship.
I don't know, but I like that makes me think a lot about Richmond and everywhere for that matter. But I've come across people, and I think maybe Jack, you're coming at this from this perspective, is there's so much that people want to do and help and volunteer wise. What if there was a way to connect people who are willing to offer not just money, not even money, but true mentorship, support, peer support. That would be really exciting. That would be transformational. Again, it comes back to community. Yes?
Yes, I live in Berkeley, and the city of Berkeley provided the housing for homeless, but not too many homeless want to go in there. So
Right.
what do you say about that? We spend money for them, yet that some people will not go in.
Yeah, that's part of the complexity. There are people certainly who, hey, if you're able to give them a house, they're going to take it. But there are a lot of people who can't or won't for whatever reasons. Sometimes it's, here I am in a place with other people that I know, and you're going to set me up in an apartment in Martinez where I don't know anybody. No, I'm just going to stay here. I mean, you might criticize them for that, but that's the mentality. It could be that there's a prerequisite or a requirement that they, be clean or something like that.
They cannot have a job.
Or pets. That's a big thing. I mean, whose place? Is it my place to criticize someone for having a pet and that's all they have? Absolutely not. That's their family. So take that into account. That's what Haven for Hope did. It definitely showed. Now, this doesn't solve the crisis. And one thing I just want to make really clear, I am not saying that we should just replicate Haven for Hope here and everything's going to be solved. No. But from an appreciative inquiry standpoint, I think it's a good place to learn from. And let's build on that and consider what's not working there too and fill in the gaps. There's been an effort up in Placer County. They tried to do something based on this, and it was not, the politicians threw it out. There's an effort in Sacramento where they're trying to work on this. Apparently they're not making much progress in fundraising. I looked at their website. No offense to anybody, I didn't find it too compelling. It was basically saying, just do what Haven for Hope's doing. But I think what would be really exciting is to say, look at what they're doing, and let's look at our unique environment and what would be even more impressive. If we build a compelling vision that people who are business-minded, look, business leaders don't like to waste money. And if something looks like there's return on investment, I don't mean financially, but on our hearts, if we really know that this would work, I think raising money is actually not going to be the problem. I think it's a compelling vision that draws people in is the challenge. Yes?
Is the state of Texas looking at this as a model, or is it just kind of by the two counties that have created the public-private partnership?
So Houston also has a program. There's kind of a navigation center in Houston that's gotten a lot of attention. That Cal Matters article, by the way, if you send me an email, I can send you the link, or you can Google it. It goes into a lot of that. But one thing, in terms of what's on the top of your mind, not a lot of people are thinking about this in Texas because it's being dealt with. But in California, it's like the #1 issue that people are talking about. And in fact, just real quick, something I just read last night. Yes, since 2012 in Texas, homelessness has gone down 28%. California has gone up 43%. But look at the sheer numbers. In Texas, 81 people per 100,000 are unhoused. In California, it's more than 5 times that. It's 439. But then also in Texas, they're only spending $800 per person. In here, California, anyone want to guess? So Texas is spending $800 a person. They've drastically reduced homelessness. And when I say they, it's not God, it's just in totality. California, what do you think the number is? 10,000. Well, you read the article, Jill. 10,786. That's what disgusts business leaders. Why am I going to put money into something that's just not working, it's being wasted? Imagine being able to have a vision that worked. I don't think raising money would be a problem. Other questions? Anyone know a billionaire? Oh.
This is totally off the subject, but as a resident of Richmond, I'm wondering, will you run again?
I said I wasn't here politically.
I know, but
I'm getting that a lot these days.
I just think you're brilliant, and I look at what we have right now, and it's like, gives me hope that someone like you is even remotely interested in running.
Well, I appreciate that. If I could be brilliant by saying confidently that I don't have the answer, then great. And frankly, I do think that's what we need, because I believe we can find the answer, but we have to get people together to do it. I am seriously considering. I haven't said no. Yeah. All right. Well, stick around. Happy to stick around and talk more. And if you want to, get into more details, I'm happy to do that. But let this be a catalyst in your heart, in your mind. If there's somebody you know, if there's some crazy idea you have, I think probably what's going to happen is there'll be a shift somehow. It'll be subtle. It won't be predicted. It'll be based on some random, relationship.
I do have one question. Preparing for this meeting, I searched on YouTube Rotary and homelessness, and there's a lot of activity around the world, in Australia, UK, all over the place. It's not just our problem. And then I read the comments below. So what Rotary is doing is giving care packages,
Right.
hygiene and a little bit of food,
Right.
socks, underwear. And then the comments were like, don't give them anything, you'll just encourage them, which is a little bit abrasive and rough.
Yeah.
But that is where I think people kind of break down, before they sit down at the table to say, okay, what will our plan be? They're already kind of hobbling themselves because enough of us have a concern, or enough people have a concern, that you don't want to facilitate by carrying in the condition. We need to get them off the street into a place where they can be careful. That to give them anything where they're at in that tent under the bar tracks is actually just an enabling action. And I feel like there's something to think about in that. It feels awful to say it.
Yeah, well, to me, it comes back to management versus transformation. And in the realm of conflict resolution, conflict management is like preventing people from killing each other. Okay, good. Ceasefire, okay, make sure people have their needs met, but you haven't really solved anything. Transformation is fundamentally transforming the relationship such that that conflict isn't there, and they're less likely to be one in the future. My personal values are that if someone asks for help, if I can give help, I give help. I don't believe it's my place to judge somebody one way or another. But I was in Chicago last week, giving a training, and I was walking through downtown Chicago, and I was being confronted almost on every block by people asking for change, and it's like, sure, here's $1. You asked me to, it's not my place. You asked for $1, I got one. And then I ran out. And then, what do you do? And it's like, that's kind of it's like, yes, and, help if someone asks for help, but that's not solving the problem. but refraining from helping, I don't think is necessarily solving the problem either. So, that's a personal decision. But even like organizationally, I agree. Simply putting effort into, feeding people, keeping them alive. Yes, we need that, and if it's truly needed, let's do it. And let's think beyond that. That's where I want to put my effort, is to beyond that part. So, all right, thank you.